We will now move into the session number 2. And the theme of session 2 is generating synergy, exploring opportunities for connecting the connectivity initiatives of ASEAN's dialogue partners. Now, the session aims to provide a platform to share it and exchange information on various initiatives of ASEAN's dialogue partners to support Master Plan on ASEAN Connectivity 2025. Now, experts from government ministries, agencies, financial institutions will be invited to present their respective initiatives and exchange views on ways to coordinate and cooperate with an aim to further bolster the region's connectivity goals. Now, ladies and gentlemen, for this session, we have 5 outstanding speakers joining us, and Mr. Lim Chze Cheen, head of ASEAN Connectivity Division of ASEAN Secretariat, will be guiding us through the session as the session moderator. And as previously you have experienced, if you have any comments or questions, please feel free to upload them by scanning the QR code. You'll find the QR code on the flip side of the program leaflet. Questions for the speakers will be collected and answered during the Q&A discussion session. We'd like to ask you for your active participation. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we will have as our first speaker Mr. Gary Ellem, Head of Regional Engagement for Partner for Infrastructure of Australia, and he will give us a presentation on supporting infrastructure connectivity in ASEAN. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Ellem with a big round of applause.
Thank you very much, everyone. Good afternoon. And I'd like to begin by thanking the MFA and the ASEAN Career Centre for the invitation. I think the opportunity as a dialogue partner to be involved in these discussions is really very useful. I'd like to talk today about a relatively new Australian program called Partnerships for Infrastructure. I'll talk a little bit about what it is, how it works, and some of the observations that we've identified about contributing to collaboration in Southeast Asian infrastructure challenges. So, as we all know, the region faces big challenges and big opportunities in terms of infrastructure development. And successfully meeting those challenges is really important to the continued prosperity and stability of the region. And Australia shares an interest in that success. So Australia is committed to supporting ASEAN and the Southeast Asian nations to achieve their ambition for a connected and integrated ASEAN. So with that in mind, and recognising the centrality of ASEAN to Australia's regional engagement, at the 2020 ASEAN-Australia Summit, the Australian government announced increased funding for regional infrastructure, leading to the creation of what we now call the Partnerships for Infrastructure program. And a big focus for us is supporting the overall vision of the Master Plan on ASEAN Connectivity. Let me talk a little bit about how Partnerships for Infrastructure, or P4I, works. So we work across the ODA eligible countries of Southeast Asia, as well as working at the ASEAN level and also working with Timor-Leste. In terms of the substance of what we do, we are not a financing program. We're a grant program of the Australian government, and we focus on supporting government's decision-making, in particular related to the early stages of the infrastructure life cycle. So in practice, that involves working together with governments on issues to do with infrastructure planning and prioritisation, sector regulation, as well as the broader enabling policy environment and procedures that affect infrastructure planning and delivery. So that includes things like procurement policy, financing strategies, and public investment management more broadly. So that's a really central part of the content of our program. We also address 2 really important cross-cutting themes to do with resilience and inclusion, recognising that these 2 issues are really critical to delivering quality infrastructure. In terms of our sectoral focus, we focus on economic infrastructure, and this is also pretty consistent with MPAC. So that means focusing on transport, energy, and digital and telecommunications sectors. So I'd like to talk a little bit about how we work, because there's a few different ways through which we deliver our assistance. The first is through government-to-government partnerships. So this focuses on linking Australian government agencies with their peers in the region to share knowledge and experience. So P4I as a program may identify that there's a particular area of expertise or experience in Australia that could be relevant to one of our regional partners, and we play a role in bringing those together to support a program of mutual learning. Secondly, we have this core focus on infrastructure advisory services. This includes technical and policy advice relating to the issues that I mentioned on the previous slide. But we also do some project preparation. This is not necessarily our core business, but with the right opportunity, we do actually invest in assisting with pre-feasibility studies and feasibility studies for specific infrastructure projects. Recognizing that well-prepared projects can really play, having well-prepared projects is really important to mobilizing finance and improving the financing options that are available to governments. Thirdly, there's the idea of knowledge sharing and learning. So this can include things like study tours, training, or just convening different groups together to discuss issues of mutual interest. One of the interesting things about partnerships for infrastructure is that we work at different levels. So we are a regional program. We work through ASEAN to support common approaches in line with the vision of MPAC 2025. But we also work at the bilateral level. So we're almost like a regional program plus 8 bilateral programs. So we work at the national government level to support government agencies' decision-making. And there's also a kind of a level in the middle where we might work sub-regionally, and with different combinations of countries. And I'll explain that through a couple of examples. We have a lot of different activities underway. I just thought I'd pull together a snapshot of a few of the activities that we're working on. We recently completed, at the request of the ASEAN Secretariat, an ASEAN container processing study, and the ASEAN transport ministers in October this year adopted an action plan informed largely by the findings of this study. We're also piloting an infrastructure productivity framework, which is a way of assessing the productivity of infrastructure investments through ASEAN and the ASEAN Secretariat. And we recently ran a capacity building exercise with the ACMEX member countries on infrastructure pipeline planning. We have a lot of different work underway at the bilateral level as well. We're working with the Laos government on a connectivity partnership, which among other things is doing some feasibility study work related to cross-border facilities on National Road 2, which is an ASEAN priority project. We're working with the Philippines on rail investment guidelines, in Cambodia on PPP capacity building. We have an interesting new project in Indonesia to develop a climate strategy for the electricity utility. So this is just to give you a very quick snapshot of the types of things that we do on P4I. At the moment, our portfolio is fairly focused on the transport sector, but we have a range of projects coming through in the energy sector, and I think over the course of the next 12 months or so, we'll see an uptick in telecommunications activities as well. But I really just wanted to conclude by talking about some of the interesting characteristics of P4I that give some insight into the opportunities for regional engagement. Firstly, in my experience, the structure of P4I being both a regional and a multi-country program is quite interesting and provides a number of interesting entry points. So we can work with national governments to help them to implement commitments that they've made at the regional level. But similarly, we can take experience from the national level and feed that into a broader regional policy dialogue. We have teams working around the region, and we can identify themes, we can identify common challenges that might benefit from discussion at the ASEAN level about common approaches. And there's a few key areas where we're seeing those themes emerge already. For example, in relation to a lot of interest in PPPs, mobilizing private sector finance, green finance, as well as the energy transition, the renewable energy transition. Secondly, because of our focus, we can help to address upstream policy challenges that often get in the way of good project financing. There are many organizations, including many represented here today, who work on specific projects but come up against obstacles that get in the way of being able to make that investment. And they often arise from things in the policy and regulatory environment. P4I works in a way that we can work at the project level, but we can also engage in some of those broader policy issues that sometimes constrain good investment. Thirdly, we have the opportunity as this multi-country program to share lessons among regional peers. So I talked at the beginning about Australian government agency engagement, and that's something that's very important to us. But we're also keen to share lessons amongst Southeast Asian government peers. So we already know of examples where one country has dealt with a particular issue and that has particular relevance for another country in the region, and we can help to bring those experiences together. And finally, flexibility and responsiveness are really important. This is a very complex space in which we work. There are many challenges. There are many project challenges. There's a lot of challenges in the policy realm, and many of the issues are interconnected, and we can't expect to get it right from the beginning all the time. So it's really important to be flexible and to respond to opportunities as they arise, in particular in terms of collaboration. Organizations working on a specific infrastructure investment, we might be able to come in to support them to address some of the policy obstacles that they may be facing. So I'll just conclude by saying that an interesting thing I remembered last night was when P4I was designed, it was originally called the Southeast Asia Economic Governance and Infrastructure Facility, which is a very long name, very precise, but not very inspiring. So we renamed ourselves Partnerships for Infrastructure, recognizing that the idea of partnership really is central. This space that we work in is very complex, and no one organization has all the answers, so the idea of collaboration, we really do believe, is the key to making the most meaningful progress that we can. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ellem, for introducing to us the P4I program, also highlighting the characteristics that makes it innovative engagement. Also, he shared with us the behind the stories behind the naming as well. Thank you so very much. Now, introducing our next speaker, we have Mr. Timothy Winters, Economic and Financial Policy Officer and Global Gateway Expert of Digital Transition and Connectivity Division of European External Action Service. And Mr. Winters will give us a presentation on EU Global Gateway, the EU Sustainable Connectivity Offer. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Winters to the podium.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, a big thanks to the organizers for the invitation to the European Union to participate in this event today. It's a real privilege to be here. I am representing the European External Action Service, which is the diplomatic service of the European Union, based in Brussels. Largely, today I'll be giving you a sort of policy overview of a broad policy which the European Union has, the Global Gateway, which I think will show many similarities in the priorities and the efforts that we're all making towards ASEAN connectivity. So with an eye on the clock, which is ticking down ahead of me, let's start with a quick overview of what is Global Gateway. And basically, Global Gateway is the EU's offer for strategic investment in quality infrastructure. It has several key features. First of all, we try to take a comprehensive approach to what we offer. That means combining both support for hard infrastructure investment, roads, railways, power grids, submarine cables, but also the so-called soft infrastructure, the regulatory environment, which makes those investments work. From an EU perspective, that comprehensive approach is basically crucial to achieve quality. You have to not only invest in the physical assets, but make sure that the environment in which they exist is really contributing to their success. The other key dimension of quality that we try and support through Global Gateway is sustainability. That means sustainability in many dimensions, not just environmental, social, but also financial, economic sustainability. The concept is not to create unnecessary, unsustainable projects, to minimize the negative impact and maximize the positive externalities of any of the infrastructure that we're supporting. Finally, Global Gateway is a large-scale initiative from the European Union. This is critical. We've been hearing the size of the investment needs in the ASEAN region and globally would also apply. And so the aim of the EU with Global Gateway is to bring together the many different tools that exist across the EU itself and the member states of the European Union to try and make something which can really meet those needs. So with a total ambition of supporting up to 300 billion euros of investments until 2027. And finally, the concept of Global Gateway is that by bringing together that comprehensive approach, the sustainability and the large scale, we're providing something which can actually accelerate the implementation of the sustainability, the Sustainable Development Goals in the region and around the world. So that's the what. How about the why? Why Global Gateway? Why did we sort of start to create this policy? First of all, because of a clear need which we heard from our partners, and I think we can all agree on that. We've heard that so many times today. A series of large challenges, and challenges which face both the European Union and the partner countries. These include the need for us all to recover after the post-COVID crisis. Also, longer term, we see the need to step up action for the climate to ensure that the growth that we need is actually sustainable in the long term. And we know that infrastructure investment is a key way to respond to those challenges. But we also know that the gap in investment is both more urgent because the economic needs are only growing, but also more challenging to meet given that context, given the economic crisis, the limited fiscal space, etc., means that we could see clearly a need for a new approach to bringing in new money in a new way into this sector. The other reason for why, which again we've heard many times today, is the shifting global context. I think probably for many of us, COVID was a very clear example of the dependencies that exist, for example, in supply chains, and the changing geopolitical dynamics contribute to that. From an EU perspective in Global Gateway, the aim is to take that not just as a challenge, but as an opportunity to build mutually beneficial partnerships, partnerships which contribute to an open world, a connected world, which makes sense both for the EU and for its partners. And those are also the principles that underpin the EU's own Indo-Pacific strategy, which we launched in September last year. So moving on to a little bit about sort of what makes Global Gateway different or interesting. I think, first of all, the concept is to start from the partners' priorities. Indeed, the EU's work on connectivity, which first started in 2018 with our EU-Asia connectivity strategy, was very much inspired by the work in the Asia-Europe meeting, the ASEM, where the connectivity concept, I think, was sort of really taking shape. The response to partners' interests, for example, means that we start with the MPAC, the Master Plan on ASEAN Connectivity, see the priorities in there, and then design our programs starting from that. Secondly, again, quality. I mentioned that at the beginning, but I think it's a crucial part of how we want to distinguish the offer that we provide with Global Gateway. And again, that means sustainability in all its forms, meaning sure that the investments deliver real economic impact. Thirdly, I want to mention coherence. Now, this sounds a little bit like an internal administrative matter. On the European Union side, we have the European Union institutions, there are the member states, there are the member states' financial institutions, there are the European Investment Bank, the other financial institutions, all contributing to this picture. And that's quite a complicated picture. And with Global Gateway, the aim is to try and simplify and join up the offer of those different institutions. And so, as I say, whilst that sounds like an administrative approach, our concept is that we know it can be challenging to work across such a complex institutional landscape. We hope to simplify that with Global Gateway, and so ultimately make it easier to work with the European Union as a consolidated whole. And equally, taking that joined-up EU approach, then be better able to work with other partners. One can think of, for example, partners in the G7. We heard earlier today about the work of Japan and the US on the Just Energy Transition Partnership in Indonesia. The EU wants to contribute to that as well. And this idea of Global Gateway, joining up those components, is how we think we'd be best able to contribute to that work. And finally, again, the volume attracting more finance into the infrastructure sector. Our concept is that by having that focus on quality, on sustainability, we're better able to bring in private sector financing, which needs that reliable, sure approach to the investments that it will be participating in, and also using new tools in terms of public finance. So, for example, in the EU, we've recently been rolling out a new large investment guarantee, which enables our financial institutions to provide more financing for private investments in infrastructure. A final quick word on how things are going. Where is this? Global Gateway was announced last year, a year ago. In a sense, that was the culmination of a long build-up to that and bringing together many streams of work. But a year into the strategy, we've seen several flagship announcements of projects around the world which we're focusing on for Global Gateway. Next week is the commemorative EU-ASEAN Summit, where we'll also be announcing further large flagship projects together with the ASEAN region. As I mentioned, we're already also working on the coordination structures across the EU member states. We have new fora to do that, both with member states and working on something similar for coordination with European businesses, and also improving coordination with partners. I mentioned the G7, working also with Australia and others in the Asia region. And then looking forward to what's next. Obviously, implementation will continue. That's a crucial part of this, meaning identifying more projects. And that would be my call to you, is to contribute to that process of highlighting where those opportunities are. Also communicating. One element that we see is that, in fact, there are so many different tools available that are not always well known to the people who need to be able to use them. And so, in a sense, part of the purpose that we have with Global Gateway is to make it easier to understand and easier to access those, so the outreach. And then finally, asking you to reach out to us through the delegations in your countries, so that we can hear where there are the new needs and where there are new opportunities. So I'll leave it there. Thank you very much, and look forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Winters, for keeping to the time and for your great overview of Global Gateway, EU's offer of strategic investment in infrastructure. Now moving on to our next speaker. It is time to introduce to you Mr. Umezaki So. He is Director of Economic Integration Studies Group, Development Studies Center, Institute of Developing Economies, Japan External Trade Organization, for his presentation. Please give him another big round of applause.
Thank you very much. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, and ladies and gentlemen, very good afternoon. And thank you very much for inviting me to this forum. Actually, this is my first travel abroad since the pandemic of COVID-19. So it was very good for me to come to my neighbor country. Anyway, based on the request from the organizer, today I will focus on one aspect of Japan's partnership for ASEAN countries. It is not quite new. It is not very original to Japan, but it is very important for Japan. It is Japan's partnership for quality infrastructure. As you already know, the first two speakers in this session already mentioned this quality infrastructure. Indeed, this is not new, I mentioned, because Japanese government always tried to maintain the high quality of infrastructure investment. But recently, this became one of the mainstream in Japan's ODA policy. By the way, I'm a researcher at a research institute in Japan, so my view here is my own, and I'm not representing any part of the government. Okay, let me start from the reason why Japan emphasizes the quality infrastructure. Japan's economic presence in ASEAN was very high. Even now, it is very high. But against the backdrop of remarkable economic development of Asian countries, China and ROK in particular have expanded their economic presence in ASEAN. So as a natural, of course, there will be kind of competition, not just in the private sector, but also in the public sector as well. Intensifying competition among Japan, China, and ROK and others to bring more policy options to ASEAN member states. More competition or more competitive bidding among potential donors would bring more favorable options, favorable conditions to the potential recipients, in this case, ASEAN member states. And why Japan started to emphasize the quality infrastructure? There was a trigger. Maybe all of you know about the high-speed rail link project in Indonesia. So in September 2015, Indonesian government chose China over Japan as a joint venture partner based on the lower cost and the shorter construction period offered by China. It's a kind of natural choice indeed. But at the same time, Japan's long-term efforts for the preparation for the project was in vain. Then, Japan found it necessary to disseminate the importance of paying explicit attention to the quality of infrastructure to potential recipients and also the competing donors as well. There's a trade-off between the quality and the cost of infrastructure. If we want to maintain the high quality of infrastructure, sometimes we need to pay a lot more. Not a lot. And large cost of infrastructure development needs to be rewarded by economic efficiency and resiliency and durability. And also, infrastructure development have high impacts on a wide range of the society. So we need to pay a lot of attention to that. So Japan government decided to disseminate the importance of this quality infrastructure starting from the May 2015. It was just before the Indonesian government's decision. Then Prime Minister Shinzo Abe announced the Partnership for Quality Infrastructure. And the next year, when Japan hosts the G7 meeting, the meeting endorsed the G7 Ise Shima principle for promoting quality infrastructure investment. And also in 2018, APEC endorsed the guidebook for the quality infrastructure. And in the next year, 2019, at the occasion of Osaka Summit, G20 meeting endorsed the G20 principles for quality infrastructure investment. So Japan also in ASEAN, Japan's initiatives on quality infrastructure have been mentioned regularly in the joint statement in ASEAN-Japan Summit since 2015. The basic idea is basically unchanged. What is the quality infrastructure? It emphasizes the importance of economic efficiency in terms of low life cycle cost, not just about the initial investment cost, but also including the maintenance cost afterwards. And also safety, resilience against the natural disasters, and considerations on environmental social impacts, and contribution to local society, or something like this. So we need to pay attention to these. Then what Japan would do for that, so expansion of acceleration of assistance through JICA, and also collaboration with ADB, and something like that. And in the end, it is also emphasized that it's important to promote the importance of quality infrastructure investment globally in the process of developing relevant international standards. Then this is the G20 principles for quality infrastructure investment. Basically, the idea is not changed since the 2015. Efficiency, life cycle cost, environmental consideration, resilience, social consideration, and governance, something like this. Then, the original concept of quality infrastructure are largely maintained and accepted by larger number of countries, including China and ROK. This is some of the list of quality infrastructure investment in ASEAN. Then, quality infrastructure is not new, as I mentioned. Basically, this is a checklist to ensure the high quality of infrastructure investment, starting from efficient mobilization of financial resources, ensuring alignment with socio-economic development of partner countries, or something like this, economic efficiency, inclusiveness, safety, sustainability, or convenience, or something like this. Then, these are the examples, and as Japanese government is in dissemination process, so all of these information is available in this source, the source of the quality infrastructure investment casebook. You can just Google and find the document. Then, many infrastructure projects by Japan is evaluated based on this checklist. So this is the basic idea of how Japan is promoting quality infrastructure. Okay, let me conclude by saying some final remarks. So Japan's initiatives for promoting quality infrastructure can be regarded as a kind of branding strategy of Japan's infrastructure investment through ODA and other official flows. By highlighting and disseminating the importance of quality aspects of infrastructure development, Japan has been trying to avoid race to the bottom in the competition. Since the initial announcement by Shinzo Abe in 2015, the concept of quality infrastructure has been accepted by increasing number of countries, starting from G7, G20, APEC, and ASEAN, and also through bilateral talks. And potential recipients, as a member states, will have the choices, more choices in terms of cost and quality, and are recommended to pay explicit attention to the life cycle costs instead of the initial costs only. So this quality aspect will become very important because anyway, recipient countries needs to pay some part of the cost. So this is the idea of quality infrastructure, including my own interpretation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. So, for offering your extensive insights into Japan's emphasis on quality infrastructure. Next up, our speaker is Mr. Sung-yong, Director General of EDCF Corporation Cooperation Department at Exim Korean Bank. Please welcome him with a big round of applause.
Before I start my presentation, thank you very much for organizers to invite me and give the opportunities to introduce our EDCF operation in Asian region. Today, I'm going to discuss about brief introduction of EDCF, and then the main activities in Asian region for specific countries. And third, I will provide some example project that we have supported so far. EDCF is the abbreviation of Economic Development Cooperation Fund, which is Korean government ODA loan program. And Korea Exim Bank was entrusted by the government for executing agency for EDCF operation. That's why I'm here to introduce you this presentation. This fund was established in 1987, and so far we have approved $21.4 billion for 489 projects across 58 countries. And our partner countries would be the developing countries classified by OECD DAC eligibility. And of course, based on the characteristic of our loan program, we have focused on economic and social infrastructure for our partner countries. And for the terms and conditions, we provide a very concessional loan to our partner countries so that they can utilize our money to build up their infrastructure. And this is a brief introduction about sector allocation. Of course, the transportation sector is the largest sector we have supported, and those are very related to the connectivity issue. And followed by water and health and energy, etc. And now on, I briefly introduce the main activities to our ASEAN partner countries. The total commitment for Asia region is $7.8 billion for 179 projects, approximately 36% of our total volume. And because of the we are ODA program, our eligible partner country would be the OECD DAC ODA eligibility countries. So among Asian region, those 6 countries are our partner countries. First is the Vietnam. We have supported 66 projects so far, about $2.6 billion. And if you can see the graph, the characteristic, the interesting thing is recently, actually after 2016, our volume to Vietnam was dramatically decreased. As far as I know, because Vietnam government started to reschedule and restructuring their public debt, the volume is decreasing, but we hope soon we can revitalize our volume to Vietnam. And second, Cambodia, 32 project, about $1.3 billion. Transportation also the first sector. And Philippines, 23 project, $1.3 billion. Indonesia, 68 project, amounting 2.6 billion US dollar. And Myanmar 16 project about 0.9 billion US dollar, and last Lao PDR 18 project for about 0.6 billion US dollar. And lastly, I will introduce some example cases that we have supported so far. And first, this is how EDCF can contribute to ASEAN connectivity enhancement. Actually, we support and identify projects considering connectivity strategy of each country's national development plan. And for example, for Philippines, they would like to increase connectivity and providing missing links for national road networks. And for Vietnam, building coastal and intercity road. And Indonesia, to improve sea, river, land, and air transportation connectivity. For Cambodia, they would like to improve logistic system and enhancing transport, energy, digital connectivity. And also for Laos, they also improve international integration and connectivity through land and air transport links. And the last, Myanmar, also they would like to improve connectivity with neighboring countries with advanced trade and logistic services. And this is the first example of EDCF operation to Vietnam. Name of the project was the construction of Hanoi-Haiphong Expressway. We have supported 200 million US dollars, and currently this project was under operation, and construction was finished in 2015. We cover section 7 and 10 out of 11 sections. And through this project, we believe we can improve the road infrastructure connecting capital city, the Hanoi, and the largest port, Haiphong. It is look like Korean Seoul-Incheon Expressway. And the second case would be the Cambodia. The name of the project is Phnom Penh National Enhancement Project, National Road Enhancement Project, sorry. We supported two projects. One is national number 21, and second is national number 2 and 22. First, national road number 21 was completed. It is now under operation. We supported 64 million US dollars. And for the second project, we supported $56 million. And the characteristic, interesting characteristic for our project is not only EDCF, but also JICA and ADB also participated in whole project. So through the collaboration among partners, donor partners, Cambodia can connect to Vietnam through this project. And case number 3 is the Puerto Princesa Airport Development Project in Philippines. This project also was completed in 2017. We have supported $71 million. And we have built up the Puerto Princesa Airport new passenger terminal and access road and other facilities. And through this project, Puerto Princesa tourists can increase a lot by connecting this island to other island and main island. And the case 4 is the Northern GMS Transport Network Improvement Project in Lao PDR. This project also was completed in 2014, and we supported about 22 million US dollars. And the scope is to rehabilitate the National Road 4 in northern area of the country. And the main output is we can connect the border with Thailand. So through this project, the trade volume with Thailand is increased, and also they can connect country to country. And this is the last example. The name is a little bit long, so I will say CETA in Indonesia. The total volume we have supported is $100 million, but total program for this policy increase loan is about $1.3 billion, and it is the co-financed among ADB, KfW, JICA, and other developing partners. So based on this project, Indonesia government can set up a kind of trade policy and to promote their trade with other countries. And this is the end of my presentation, and I believe EDCF is a G2G, actually the loan program, but recently we are thinking the financing gap, I mean, the G2G budget cannot cover entire demand from our partner countries in Asian region, not only Asian region, but also globally. So that's why nowadays we are trying to invite more private sector to our development plan. The main role for EDCF, as I mentioned, our term and conditions are very concessional. So if we support some private sector project, then the commercial viability can be raised with our so-called cheap money. So I think if there is any chance, then don't be hesitate to contact our Korean embassy in your countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, Director General for your overview of EDCF and its projects. Thank you very much. And now moving on to our next speaker, we have Mr. Rob Barton, Director for the Office of East Asian and Pacific Affairs of USAID. Please welcome Mr. Rob to the stage.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I just want to say thank you very much for taking time to be with us here today. And I want to thank the ASEAN Korea Center for the kind invitation to be here today, and also congratulate you on the 10th anniversary. Today I'll touch on some points, on some of the key work that USAID is currently undertaking in partnership with ASEAN. And I also include some points that my colleagues from the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation have provided me. I'd like to mention that while I'm here representing USAID, I'm representing the U.S. government, and USAID is just one of a number of U.S. government agencies that partners with ASEAN. In terms of where USAID is with ASEAN, we partner with ASEAN to promote unity, consensus, solidarity, to bolster ASEAN's coordination and institutional capacity. And one of the primary components of this is the agreement that we engaged in with ASEAN in 2020. And so we entered into this agreement with ASEAN. It's a 5-year agreement up to $50 million. And we refer to it as the Regional Development Cooperation Agreement. And under this allows USAID and ASEAN to work together to develop activities that are supportive of the priorities of ASEAN. One of the activities that come under our agreement with ASEAN is what we refer to as IGNITE. And forgive me, we're big on acronyms in the US, so we have a number of them. So the IGNITE activity is inclusive growth in ASEAN through innovation, trade, and e-commerce. We also have the Prospect Partnership for Regional Optimization with social, political security, and cultural communities, and then the ASEAN policy implementation. Through these activities, the US and ASEAN work to bolster connectivity. ASEAN's a key market for the United States. US goods and services trade with ASEAN totaled nearly $442 billion in 2021. And so we're looking to enhance US support for ASEAN centrality in Southeast Asia. Moving forward, it's a key aspect to the overall US Indo-Pacific strategy. And one of the longest serving or lasting activities that we have in partnership with ASEAN is our work on the ASEAN single window. And so this is really an effort to enhance trade. It allows for digital exchange of customs documents, easing the flow of goods and services across borders. Our investment has been relatively modest, $13 million over 15 years. However, it's mobilized $250 million from ASEAN member states. And so this is a way in which we look to our partners where we can put in a small seed and allows them to really also bring to the table their investments as well. So it shows the strength of the partnership. And it also helps the private sector and businesses within the ASEAN sector. Looking ahead, we're supporting the master plan on ASEAN connectivity, particularly with regard to regulatory excellence. And so looking at our partnership, ASEAN, we're exploring engagements with the ASEAN Consultative Committee on Standards and Quality. Some of the announcements that came out of the recent meetings in Cambodia in November, we talked about e-vehicles and infrastructure in particular. Digital payments, we're also working with ASEAN to support e-payments. Our IGNITE program is working on efforts to enhance or to facilitate e-payments and settlement systems. And we'll also support the Working Committee on Financial Inclusion and Digital ID for financial inclusion. Again, I mentioned that USAID is not the only US government agency that's cooperating with ASEAN. So I just wanted to add a few points from our International Development Finance Corporation, which was launched in December 2019. So they're working to build a pipeline within ASEAN member states. Right now, there's over $500 million in active exposure, and we've got the Development Finance Corporation has 3 staff in Indonesia, Singapore, and Thailand, working with the host country governments, as well as with the ASEAN Secretariat. And again, at the summit in November in Cambodia, there was an amplification of over $340 million in approved DFC projects in Southeast Asia. And so looking forward, some of the discussion that came out of the summits in Cambodia. We're very happy to have the U.S.-ASEAN Comprehensive Strategic Partnership. And so we look forward to working very closely with our ASEAN colleagues going forward. We look forward to, particularly as one of the announcements that was made that USAID will be involved in is working on a platform for infrastructure and connectivity. And we really want to emphasize that this will be a demand-driven co-development mechanism. And we've got, USAID has an office in Jakarta. It's our USAID ASEAN office, and we work very closely with the Secretariat there. And it's a great way for us to engage directly and to understand what the demand needs are of ASEAN and deciding how we can partner directly with you on that. And it's also coinciding with our partnership for global infrastructure and investment. And so looking at initiatives that we have, priorities that we have from the US government, priorities that ASEAN has moving forward, and it also will be supportive of the MPAC and the ASEAN Interconnection Master Plan going forward. So with that, I would just like to say thank you very much. Again, we're grateful for the partnership that we have with ASEAN. And it's not just our partnership with ASEAN. USAID works on a bilateral basis with the majority of the ASEAN countries, depending on the level of development of the country. And we've got a number of initiatives on a bilateral level that really support our multilateral work with ASEAN. So thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Barton, for sharing with us your insights into USAID's projects, also DFC projects as well. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we would now like to move on to the panel discussion. And I will pass on the microphone over to our esteemed moderator, Mr. Lim Chze Cheen, head of ASEAN Connectivity Division of ASEAN Secretariat. The floor is all yours now.
Thank you very much, MC. First of all, I would like to thank the ASEAN Korea Center, particularly Secretary General Kim, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Korea for inviting me to moderate this particular session. So I think we have heard from our partners the various initiatives. So we have heard from Mr. Gary Ellem on how Partnership for Infrastructure has partnered ASEAN through government-to-government partnership at different levels, and also to look at how they have provided infrastructure advisory, as well as also knowledge sharing and learning. We have also heard from Mr. Timothy Winters on EU's offer through the Global Gateway, and also from Mr. So Umezaki on Japan's partnership for quality infrastructure. And he talks about life cycle cost. I think one of the initiatives in ASEAN that we have been working on, the ASEAN framework for improving infrastructure productivity, exactly looks at the life cycle of infrastructure. So there are 7 work streams there. I think that could be one basis for us to look at potential cooperation. We have also heard from Mr. San-Yong on EDCF's activities and also various specific connectivity projects in the ASEAN region, and also from Mr. Rob Barton on the USAID as well as DFC's support to connectivity in ASEAN. So for what we have heard now is partnership is essential to enhancing connectivity. The challenge with all this is how do we generate synergy, not just among our partners, but also between our partners and ASEAN. So we have heard, I think the topic of this particular session is how we can synergize ASEAN's dialogue partners, but I think we should also look at how we can synergize and cooperate with ASEAN's own initiatives so that we will be able to deliver something that is what Rob mentioned, demand-driven, something that is catered and tailored to ASEAN's needs, and something that can provide end-to-end support to the region. So so maybe let me start the ball rolling by asking a first question to all our panelists. So I would start off by saying that based on your respective experience, what do you think that ASEAN and ASEAN member states can do more to advance connectivity agenda in the region? So perhaps I'll start alphabetically. Maybe Gary, you can start first.
Thanks, Director Lim. It's an interesting question because when asked at the ASEAN level, obviously ASEAN as an organization itself doesn't deliver any infrastructure. Infrastructure is delivered by national governments and in many cases subnational governments. So I think it's an interesting question for ASEAN to think about it as an organization, what that role really is. There's lots of things that can be done. I think if we're talking about quality infrastructure, which we have been, and about wanting to avoid that race to the bottom, I think the question of standards is very important, and having a shared understanding, a shared commitment to meeting certain standards. And I think ASEAN as a regional body can really play and is playing a valuable role in not only facilitating that discussion, but actually in some ways creating some pressure amongst peers to make sure that those standards are met. And related to that also, I think the ASEAN organization is in a position to almost operate like a hub. Many agencies around the region are dealing with new challenges, but there's often a peer somewhere else in the region who's had that experience already. And I think ASEAN can, if it has that broad visibility of what's going on in the region, can play a role in connecting some of those experiences up. Thanks.
Timothy?
Thank you. I'd certainly add a +1 to that from Gary. I think perhaps to add another element would be ASEAN's role in promoting the regional approach. I mean, we all know that there are challenges even in single country infrastructure projects, but I think cross-country infrastructure projects have a whole additional layer of challenges. In one sense, purely practical, the simple coordination of things on different sides, but also the political elements that naturally come in there as well. And so I think that would be another role where I think the ASEAN as an organization can come in, and then in a sense also a call to the ASEAN member states to have that in mind, because clearly, you know, the impact is very clear about taking a regional approach, and very clear about why it's doing that for the significant economic gains that you get from a regional approach. But practically implementing those border points is still a challenge, and I think that's something that you know, still needs further attention.
Thank you, Umezaki-san.
Okay. First of all, it is important for ASEAN to let the donors compete. The competition must be fair, but at least that aspect is very important, because most of this kind of talks, bilateral talks, are not open to the public, of course. Then, but in the end, after the recipient country made the decision, so we know the results of the competition. So it is important to accumulate this kind of information as an experience. So ASEAN has an important role to share the information or share the experience of the member countries. So that kind of initiatives is important, I think. And by the way, just Mr. Lim mentioned, it's very good idea. I'm very happy to hear that ASEAN is moving toward paying more attention to the quality infrastructure, life cycle costs or something like that. So that kind of, I think that will guide the member states to think about how to compare this offer and this offer. So that is also very important aspects of ASEAN. Thank you.
Thank you, Umezaki-san. I think I'd like to invite all of you to take a look at the framework because there are opportunities for capacity building activities between ASEAN and also our partners. Mr. Ng?
Yes. Based on my experience, since I joined this organization, we identify and find our potential project through two ways. First, bilateral, second, multilateral. Through the bilateral way, we directly connect with our partner countries, specific partner countries, and we have the policy dialogue and what they want to develop, and then we consider our funding capacity. And the second way is to connect with our multilateral partners like ADB, especially for ASEAN region. As I presented my presentation, there are several experiences that we have co-worked with ADB and other bilateral agencies. In that case, we believe the performance of our project with our multilateral partners and also other bilateral partners would be better than that of our bilateral activities. What we can think about this, I believe this kind of forum, actually ASEAN Connectivity Forum, could be one of the very good example for a kind of platform to gather the information from our member country from Asia region and provide those information to every single donors to including not only for the Asia region, but globally, so that all the donors who have interest in a specific project, they can gather the money to implement those projects. As I mentioned, infrastructure development needs a lot of money. Frankly speaking, we have to talk about the money to develop something from the preparation, construction, and operation. So I think this kind of platform and the kind of multilateral activities is more important to enhance the result of our development. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Barton?
So I would echo I think what my colleagues have said. I think the support for access to finance is very important, but not just access to finance, but access to finance that is going to be not going to be a burden on the countries that are looking to access that finance. And so if there's a way in which we can all partner in a way to analyze the types of projects that are looking to be undertaken and ways in which we can bring in the private sector, bring in lenders that will be looking to support the best interest of the countries that are borrowing. I think that's a way in which we can all partner. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I see that we have some questions from the floor. Perhaps I can take some of these questions. So the first question is, in relation to ASEAN connectivity, what are the areas that each ASEAN dialogue partner can cooperate with Korea? Perhaps each one of you want to take a 30-second take on this question? Gary?
I'll make a start, thanks. It's an interesting question because I've been thinking about it a lot over the course of the last couple of days and learned a couple of things that I think are quite interesting. In very general terms, from an Australian perspective, I think Australia and Korea share a lot of interests. We're both neighbours of ASEAN as well, so I think there's a lot that we have in common, a lot of shared values and interest in our engagement with the region. And also down to some quite specific issues to do with things like maritime connectivity, very important to both countries. So I think there's a lot of potential there that can be explored, and that it would be interesting to explore that. I think just more specifically in terms of partnerships for infrastructure, I mean, as I mentioned during the presentation, there's a lot of Korea's investing in a lot of specific projects. There's always the potential to engage with each other to identify maybe where Australia can help to work with other governments to unplug some of the policy or regulatory obstacles that sometimes get in the way of those types of investments. Thanks.
Mr. Winter?
Thank you. Yeah, I think having listened to all the presentations today, I guess there are rather many areas where we can cooperate. But perhaps just taking one which comes to mind is linking up the sort of forward-looking digital sector and the standards piece. And so I think the EU and Korea have recently agreed a digital partnership, which includes working on our bilateral relationship, but also includes working together, promoting our vision for a trusted, rules-based digital environment in third countries. And it seems to me that sort of looking at that perhaps less a piece which has had less priority previously in the digital space and sort of digital infrastructure needs in ASEAN, that's a natural place where our interests and our capacities align. So I think that could be one place to start, and where we already have a framework between the EU and Korea to be able to go out into third countries.
Thank you. Umezaki-san?
Infrastructure in general is public goods. So once developed, everybody can use. So just an example from the expressway, Mr. Am mentioned in his presentation, between Hanoi and Haiphong. There are several industrial estates in the suburb of Hanoi. Then Samsung and other related companies invested a lot in that region, and also Japanese companies invested there. So the development or renovation of Hanoi-Haiphong Expressway will generate the benefits for both countries. And that's the reason why EDCF and JICA and ADB co-finance that project. So in that respect, we have many things, we share the common interests in many aspects. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, let me introduce briefly about our government's priority sectors that we have deal with more with our partner countries. Actually, last year, we pick up 3 sectors for most priority sector. First, green. We call it green, but it is very related to climate change response. And second is ICT digital transformation. Because the previous session, they also mentioned not only the physical connectivity, but also kind of digital connectivity is also very important. among Asia region. So that's why Korean governments also pick up the digital transformation as for our priority sector. And the third one is the health sector. Because as we all experienced the COVID-19 pandemic, we believe, we realize the health issue could jeopardize our normal life. So that's why we also pick up the health sector as for our priority sector. So I think those three sectors would be the best sector that we are discuss in the future. Thank you.
And for USAID, we have a memorandum of understanding with our Korean counterparts through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and implemented with KOICA. And in the ASEAN region, in particular, we're working in collaboration in the Philippines. And while I'm here in Seoul, we'll be meeting with our counterparts to discuss further collaboration. And so I think as like-minded partners, there are many areas in which we can collaborate, and we look forward to expanding on that. Just this past week, the KOICA president met with the USAID administrator, and so we're continuing our dialogue with them. And again, we look forward to being able to partner to support ASEAN centrality and find ways in which we can, again, provide demand-driven support for ASEAN.
Thank you very much. I think in ASEAN, under connectivity, you know, there are 15 areas, right? So I think we have good cooperation with Korea in several areas. So under open data development, we have one on technical vocational education and training. And we are also working on smart cities at the moment with Korea. So there are several areas that we work on. We can probably build on some other areas as well, also in cooperation with other partners through either ASEAN Korea or through a tripartite arrangement as well. Those are possibilities that we can explore. There is also another question. The second question is on, is PPP the way forward in relation to connectivity-related sectors in dialogue partner countries? Any takers? Maybe 30 seconds each?
All right, I'll start again.
Start with you. Yeah, thank you.
PPPs are, I think, a very important way forward, and it's a question that we're getting very commonly around the region at the moment. Can we provide advice on PPPs? Certainly government budgets are under severe pressure at the moment around the region, and it is, I think, an important part. Mobilizing private sector finance is a really important part of the way forward for infrastructure development. It's something Australia's got a lot of experience in, and I think it's going to be an important part of our work program.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would just add, in a sense, the question says, is PPP the way forward in relation to connectivity-related sectors? And I think I would say it's a way forward, frankly. I think it's absolutely an important part. Equally, I don't think it's always the best or certainly not the only part. So I think it's absolutely something where, as you say, you know, more efforts are needed to structure those deals where they work. But I think also we probably shouldn't assume that it's always going to be the best way to do things. I think, you know, there are different models and different projects require different structures.
Yeah. Actually, the importance of PPP has long been discussed over the years. So I think, of course, it is a potential to be a very important source of the funding. But at the same time, we need to learn from the past experiences. We had a lot of difficulties. I think one reason might be the governing law, how to organize the PPP, how to share the risk, how to share the costs, those things. So not just, I I think it's time for us to go into the details based on the experience. Thank you.
Yes, I think I also basically agree with the comment, the question here. PPP is very important for mobilizing the private sector money for development of infrastructure in our region. But on the other hand, the actual PPP project finalized project is not yet very many. I mean, PPP needs a lot of time to prepare, and not only the preparation, but also what is PPP? One of the part is private sector. How we attract the private sector to the public sector. I think the main important factor is the kind of how can I say the profitability. Sorry. The private sector may use their money for their own profitability, which means the government need provide the profitability, sufficient profitability to the private sector. In order to do that, first they have to change some the institutional policy, and also they have to also attract not only one private sector but also other private sector, and if needed, they also need to attract public sector like us to provide some concessional loan for entire project so that they can increase the commercial viability, something like that. Thank you.
Yeah, I would agree with that very much. Obviously, the amount of financing from official development assistance is not sufficient to meet all the needs. So there is a need for the private sector, but I think as development agencies, we can play a role in helping to be that bridge between the needs that exist, the interests of the private sector, and trying to bring those together. And of course, everyone has their own interests in that, but I think it's our role to help negotiate that and really help deliver for those that need the assistance most. So.
Thank you very much. I think I agree that PPP is important, and I also agree with Mr. Winters that it is a way forward rather than necessarily the way forward. Some people used to tell me that PPP needs to be a profitable proposition for private sector. Otherwise, it will not happen. But in ASEAN, sometimes we say we need properly prepared project as PPP, because you need all these different ingredients of PPPs to get to the PPP that we are talking about today, public-private partnership. So, so maybe now I move to the next question. Given that each ASEAN member state has different priority areas for connectivity, how can dialogue partners develop cooperative projects by meeting the needs of each country? Once again, 30 seconds each.
All right. There's a lot in that question, I guess. I think what we see is that there are different priority areas, but there's also a lot that are the same. There are some consistent themes in what we hear from across the region. But I think from a dialogue or development partner perspective, really the main thing is to make sure that we're always listening, that we're responding to the demands that are expressed, and to make sure that that the mechanisms that we use are actually responding to the requests that we have from our partner countries, and recognize that, yes, there will be different priorities from time to time, but our role is to support that.
I think I would say, actually, there's masses that we can do together. So amongst the dialogue partners, I think, again, for me, it's been striking today how closely aligned we are in terms of the priorities, the sectors, and also how potentially well aligned the tools are. And I think that's therefore what I would say, that we need to, first of all, focus on our respective strengths, basically. That we've got a whole range of tools that you've heard about across the panel today. So I think making sure that we are exchanging amongst ourselves about what the offer that we have is, and sort of stepping up that willingness to cooperate, basically. I think that's the only way that we can make sure that we're delivering efficiently. And I think that's what then enables us to bring something actually useful to the partner countries, because each of us have got different scales of finance available, different types of expertise in different sectors. And I think that therefore that sort of collaboration amongst the partners actually delivers something better for the ASEAN member states. And the other thing I would say in terms of cooperation amongst the dialogue partners is the need to be realistic. And so realistic about the way in which we cooperate. I think very often we look for projects where we can all co-finance a single piece of infrastructure, let's say. And everyone wants that sort of, perfect project where you know, there'll be a single signature event and we'll all be, you know, on the same photograph. And I think that perhaps actually we can have more impact by discussing a broader approach and then agreeing that, you know, one partner will focus on a particular sector or a particular piece of infrastructure, another partner will be dealing with, let's say, the regulatory environment around that piece of infrastructure. And so recognizing that actually we can have more impact by coordinating, but not necessarily always sort of seeking that perfect co-financing, I think is another piece that's really important in actually, you know, making the cooperation work.
So almost nothing to add, but basically the basis of international cooperation is bilateral talks. So if each ASEAN member states have its own interest, so you can just raise the issue in the bilateral talks. Thank you.
Yes, basically I'm also agree with the remarks that the other speakers mentioned. We, Korea, EDCF, also have regular bilateral dialogue, policy dialogue with our Asian member countries. And based on the dialogue, we identify the potential project that our partner country would like to develop. And then if we don't have enough funding, then we can also introduce some of the project to the multilateral partners like ADB. And then ADB would like to play a kind of coordination role to introduce that project to other bilateral donors so that we can gather enough funding for the project, something like that. Yes.
I think as I had mentioned, for the U.S., we've got kind of a multi-pronged approach. We have bilateral assistance programs within the ASEAN member states, and then we also work directly with ASEAN. And so at a bilateral level, as development partners, we collaborate at that level with the host country governments amongst ourselves. So there's that level of coordination. But then also we look to the signals from ASEAN. And so I would say it's helpful to us if we can get the feedback from ASEAN if there are specific sectors or areas and countries where there are needs for certain types of support that can help guide us as we go forward. And then, you know, we have the multilateral convening mechanisms where we can all come together and have those discussions. And then again, on a bilateral basis, we have that. So. Yeah, there are just a multitude of levels for us to work on that.
Yeah, I think indeed there are definitely multiple levels, not just within dialogue partners, within ASEAN and then across sectors, across multiple stakeholders. So I guess this is a journey that we all will have to take together. It is in that journey that we will learn more from each other. It is through that journey that we can strengthen our cooperation further. I think we need realistic, we need practical, we need workable projects that can actually help us to move forward connectivity agenda and also move beyond 2025. So I think we are just spot on at 000 now. So if I can ask all of you to give a big round of applause to our excellent speakers today. And thank you very much for all your participation. So back to you, MC. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, hope we can put our hands together for the wonderful job that our amazing moderator did, Thank you to Mr. Lim.